The Vampire's Last Dance. Time and place. The mansion stood alone on the outskirts of a small, forgotten town, a relic of the past. Its crumbling stone walls, now covered in thick ivy, whispered stories of long-forgotten eras, of nights spent in whispers and blood. Surrounded by dense, shadowy woods that seemed to stretch endlessly, the mansion was a world apart, frozen in time. Its windows, once grand and inviting, now sat dark and forlorn, staring out into the silent forest as if waiting for something or someone to return. But tonight, nothing would return. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the mansion's ancient facade. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, but for Isabella, it was the scent of memory. This was the last night she would walk these halls, the last night she would feel the chill of the wind against her skin, the last night before the sun rose and ended everything. She had lived for centuries, but as the dark night slowly gave way to the inevitable dawn, she knew that this was the end of her story. Mood. The atmosphere was one of sorrow and inevitability, like the final breath of a dying star. Every creak of the mansion's wooden floors, every gust of wind that rattled the windows, seemed to echo the weight of time. The room where Isabella waited was dimly lit by the flickering light of a single candle. The shadows danced on the walls like ghosts of her past, each one a memory of a life she could never fully embrace, a love she could never fully keep. There was a melancholic beauty to it all, a tragedy written in the stars, where immortality was a curse, and each moment of life was a fragment slipping through her fingers like sand. Her reflection in the mirror was not her own, for it was the image of someone who had long since been lost. Her face was as flawless as the night she was turned, but her eyes held the weariness of 1,000 years. Isabella stood by the grand window, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The first tendrils of light were beginning to creep across the sky, threatening to chase away the darkness that had been her companion for so long. The night was her realm, and yet it was also the last moment of her reign. Soon, the sun would rise, and with it, her existence would be erased. The air was thick with a palpable sense of loss, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to end. There was beauty in the stillness, a haunting beauty that only the eternal could understand. It was a beauty that came with knowing that all things, love, life, even darkness, must eventually fade. The end of an era. The silence of the night was broken only by the soft flutter of her dress as she moved across the room, each step deliberate, measured, as if savoring the last moments of her cursed immortality. This was her final night as a vampire, the final dance before the sun claimed her forever. The mansion, once alive with the laughter of parties, the murmur of whispered conversations, now stood as a tomb of memories. Every corner, every forgotten hallway, seemed to mourn the passing of an era that would soon be lost to time. Isabella walked these halls as both a prisoner and a queen, and tonight, she was both free and bound to her past, to her immortality, and to the love she could never have. This opening not only captures the dark, melancholic tone of the story, but also immerses the reader into the world of Isabella, a vampire standing on the precipice of her final moments, contemplating the beauty and sorrow of her existence as it comes to a close. It sets up a tragic, haunting atmosphere that foreshadows her ultimate fate. Character introduction. Isabella stood still in the dim light of the grand ballroom, her figure cloaked in an ethereal gown of midnight blue. The fabric shimmered, almost as if it were woven from the very stars themselves, catching the faint light of the candles that flickered weakly in the corners of the room. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk, framing her flawless face, ageless, yet deeply worn by the passage of time. Her skin, pale as porcelain, had never known the warmth of the sun, and her lips, once vibrant with life, were now mere whispers of the blood she no longer craved. Her beauty was haunting, ethereal, as though she were not entirely of this world. She moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, each step carrying an air of nobility and sorrow. Her eyes, however, told a different story. Deep pools of ancient sorrow, the color of the midnight sky, held a reflection of a soul that had been trapped in the cage of immortality for over 5 centuries. The sparkle that once shone with life and hope had long since dimmed, replaced by a sadness too profound to put into words. Isabella was a creature of contradictions, a being who had lived through centuries of history, witnessed the rise and fall of empires, yet had never truly belonged to any era. She was elegant and graceful, her presence commanding the room, but in the depths of her eyes, there was a sorrow that spoke of a life spent searching for something, anything, to make her existence meaningful. In the silence of the night, she could almost hear the echoes of her former self, the woman she once was before the curse of immortality had sealed her fate. Conflict. For centuries, Isabella had walked the earth, a prisoner of time, searching desperately for a purpose and a life that never seemed to end. She had been a queen, a lover, a confidant, but never once had she found peace. Her existence was a string of fleeting moments, a series of loves lost, kingdoms crumbled, and friends turned to dust. Every person she had ever loved had withered away while she remained, untouched by age, untouched by death. In the beginning, immortality had seemed like a gift, a blessing to be cherished. She had reveled in the beauty of endless life, the luxury of time. But as the years turned into decades, then centuries, the weight of eternal existence became unbearable. Her soul, once full of life and purpose, had begun to wither, suffocated by the endless march of time. She had tried everything to find meaning in her immortality. She had lived among humans, watched entire generations grow old and die. She had taken lovers, only to watch them age and wither away, their memories fading as she remained frozen in time. She had ruled kingdoms, experienced great victories, and suffered crushing defeats, but all of it seemed so meaningless in the end. No matter how many lives she touched, no matter how many hearts she broke, there was always an emptiness that lingered in her chest. The weight of immortality pressed on her like a suffocating blanket, and as the centuries wore on, she grew more and more tired. The joy of living, of experiencing new things, had long since faded. It had all become so monotonous. Her soul ached for release, for an end to the endless cycle of life and death that she was trapped in. But at the same time, fear gripped her heart. She feared the unknown, the void that awaited her after centuries of existence. Could she truly face the end? Could she truly embrace the release that came with death, even if it meant losing everything she had known? Tonight, as she stood by the window, watching the first rays of dawn begin to creep across the sky, she realized that the answer would come whether she was ready or not. The sun was rising, and with it, the end of her immortal existence. The pain she had lived with for centuries would soon be over, but there was a terrifying finality to it, an unknown that haunted her as much as the immortality she had come to despise. For the first time in centuries, Isabella felt a flicker of fear not of the world, but of herself. Could she truly face the end of her story? Or would she find herself lost in the darkness, forever yearning for a purpose she could never find? Her soul cried out for release, but the fear of what lay beyond kept her rooted in place. The torment of immortality and the dread of death intertwined within her, a twisted dance of longing and terror. She had been searching for a reason to live for centuries, but now she found herself desperately searching for a reason to die. In these moments of reflection, Isabella's inner turmoil becomes palpable, and the weight of her immortal curse is brought to the forefront. The conflict between longing for peace and fearing the unknown creates a powerful emotional tension that drives the story forward, pulling the reader into Isabella's world of internal struggle. The beauty of her existence, intertwined with the pain of her immortality, sets the stage for the bittersweet ending to come, the lover's arrival. The night had worn on, the weight of time hanging heavy in the air, when a soft knock at the door broke the silence. Isabella's heart skipped a beat, though she did not expect company. She knew who it was, even before she turned toward the entrance of the grand ballroom. It had been centuries since she last saw him, and yet, the sound of his name echoed in her memory like a familiar, haunting melody. Alexander, she whispered to herself, as if saying his name could make him real again, could bring back the youth and vitality that had once filled their world. Her breath hitched as she felt him near. The door creaked open, and in the doorway stood a man she had not seen in ages, but whose presence was as undeniable as ever. Alexander. Time had not been kind to him. His once youthful face had been marked by the passage of the years, his hair now streaked with silver, and the lines around his eyes deepened by age and the burdens of life. But even in his older form, there was something familiar in his eyes, a spark that had never truly faded. The man she had once loved, the man who had been the center of her world, stood before her once more, though the years had left their indelible marks. He stepped into the room, his footsteps tentative, as though he, too, was afraid to break the fragile moment. The years had robbed him of his youthful arrogance, replacing it with a quiet sadness, but the connection between them, unchanged by time, was still there, strong and unyielding. Isabella's heart ached with emotion, but she did not move toward him. Instead, she stood in place, the silence between them speaking volumes. The room seemed to grow still, as though the world had stopped turning. She had not expected him to come, and yet, here he was, appearing just as he had when she had last seen him, full of life, full of hope, before fate had torn them apart. Isabella, Alexander's voice trembled, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. I. I never thought I'd see you again. Her eyes softened, a mix of love and sorrow flashing across her features. And yet, here we are, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze lingered on him, searching for the boy she had once known in the man who stood before her. The years had changed him, but he was still the same in her eyes, the same as the day she had kissed him goodbye. The air between them was thick with nostalgia. Memories of their time together rushed back to Isabella like a flood. She remembered his smile, his laughter, the way he had once held her close, promising that nothing would ever separate them. But immortality, that cruel, endless curse, had changed everything. She had made the impossible decision to become what she was, leaving him behind, knowing that he would age while she would remain frozen in time. And he had aged, he had lived his life without her, while she had remained untouched by the years. She had watched from the shadows as he built his life, loved others, and eventually grew old without her. She had let him go, for she could not bear to watch him suffer because of her curse. And now, standing before him, she realized the full weight of what they had lost. Yet, despite the years between them, the bond was still there. She could see it in the way he looked at her. His eyes still held the same depth of affection and longing, though tinged with sadness. They had both changed, but the love they had once shared had never truly died. It was the love of a lifetime, but one that had been cruelly denied. Isabella felt a strange, bittersweet yearning stir in her chest. She knew what was coming, and there was no escaping it. Time was slipping away, and soon it would be gone, along with the man who had been her heart's desire. The sun was rising soon, and she would either meet her end in its deadly rays or, finally, find peace. But before that, she longed for one final moment with him. One last memory to carry with her into whatever awaited her beyond this world. She moved slowly toward him, the echo of her steps reverberating in the silence. The sadness in her eyes deepened, but there was a warmth there, a vulnerability that she had never shown to anyone in all her years of immortality. "Alexander," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly, "there is one thing I ask of you. Before the night ends, before the sun rises and takes me away, will you dance with me?" His brows furrowed, a mixture of confusion and pain crossing his face. "Dance?" he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "But Isabella, you—" "I know," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "I know what I am. But just for tonight, just for one last time, let me feel alive. Let me hold you close and remember what it was like to be human, to be with you." Her eyes locked with his, and in that moment, she could see the conflict in his gaze, the deep love he had for her, and the unbearable pain of knowing that this moment would end. But despite everything, he nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek as he stepped toward her. "One last dance," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "For you." As the music began to play, a haunting melody that filled the room with its mournful beauty, they moved together. It was slow, unhurried, as if time itself had suspended its cruel march for just a moment, allowing them to savor the precious seconds they had left. Their bodies fit together as they had in their youth, and for a fleeting moment, it was as if no time had passed at all. They were young again, lovers reunited by fate, with the weight of eternity forgotten, if only for a while. But in the back of Isabella's mind, she knew the truth. This dance, this moment, was their final goodbye. This chapter deepens the emotional stakes between Isabella and Alexander, showcasing their eternal love despite the harsh reality of their separation by time and immortality. The request for one last dance symbolizes both their enduring connection and the impending end of their shared story, the dance. As the music began, its haunting melody filled the room, echoing through the ancient walls of the mansion. The notes were soft at first, the strings weaving together a tapestry of melancholy and longing, a perfect reflection of the bittersweet nature of their love. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the familiar weight of time settle over her, the pulse of the music reverberating in her chest like the last heartbeat of a dying world. She took a step toward Alexander, her hand trembling slightly as she extended it toward him. In the silence between them, their gazes locked, and without a word, he accepted her, drawing her gently into his embrace. The rhythm of the waltz began, slow, measured, and deliberate, each step a final testament to everything they had shared and everything they would never have again. They moved together, their bodies in perfect synchrony, as if the years that had separated them had never existed. Isabella's heart, though cold and unfeeling for centuries, seemed to flutter again in this moment, as if the dance had breathed life back into it. For a brief second, she was no longer a vampire, no longer a creature of darkness, but simply a woman, in love, lost in the warmth of Alexander's arms. The dance was a graceful, intimate exchange, a shared memory unfolding between them. But with every turn, With every step, Isabella felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on her. The music swirled around them like the very air of their past, carrying with it echoes of times long gone. This was no longer just a dance. It was the final chapter of a love story that had been cruelly interrupted by the passage of time and the curse of immortality. The slow waltz held far more significance than just a simple moment of closeness. It was the last time they would be together in this way, alive, breathing, sharing the same space. Isabella's once vibrant soul, now weighed down by centuries of sorrow, could feel the presence of death creeping closer with each delicate step. The dance represented the grace she had once possessed in her life as a human, a fleeting beauty that would soon be lost forever. Her immortal existence had been a long, tortured path, filled with regret, loss, and loneliness, and now, in the dance, she felt the weight of it all lifting, slowly, gently, like a veil being pulled away from her soul. The waltz was a fragile thing, intimate, delicate, fragile as the last moments of a life about to end. Each movement, though graceful, carried with it the finality of what was to come. As they glided across the floor, Isabella's thoughts drifted to what the dance truly symbolized, an elegant closure to the years of torment, a final step in her journey toward peace. For her, the dance was as much an act of release as it was of love. She had lived for centuries, never truly able to escape the curse that had bound her to the night. But now, as the music played, she realized that the dance itself, this final, beautiful moment with Alexander, was her release. It was her grace, her redemption, and her peace all wrapped into one. Emotions and flashbacks. As they danced, Isabella's mind drifted, and the room around her seemed to blur, the present moment melting into the past. The music flowed like a river of memories, pulling her back in time to the very first time she had met Alexander. She was a young woman then, living a simple life in the countryside, unaware of the shadow that would soon cross her path. The night they had met was as vivid as ever. The moon was full, casting an ethereal light over the garden where they had shared their first words. He had been so full of life, so full of promise, and she, just a woman, naive and innocent, had fallen for him without hesitation. The joy of their early days together rushed back to her, those first stolen kisses, the whispered promises beneath the stars, the plans they had made for a future that now seemed impossible. But as time passed, the world had changed. Isabella had been offered the gift of immortality, a chance to escape the suffering and heartbreak of a life that had always felt fleeting. She had hesitated, unsure of what it would mean, but love had made the decision for her. She had chosen him. She had chosen to become something else, to become a vampire, believing it would ensure they could be together forever. But in that moment of transformation, she had never fully understood the cost. The first time she had seen him after her transformation, Alexander had been terrified. He had recoiled at her cold skin, her eyes now an endless void, filled with the darkness of the undead. She had tried to explain, but he had seen only the monster she had become. In the end, he had chosen to let her go, to live his life without her, as she remained frozen in time. The years had passed, decades, centuries, and the pain of her choice had only grown heavier. She had lost him once, and in a sense, she had lost herself as well. As they moved together in the present, Isabella felt the weight of those lost years, the weight of the love they had once shared, and the pain of the years they had spent apart. The music carried them both back to that moment, and she could feel the ache in her chest as the memory unfolded before her. The farewell. With every turn, every gentle sway, Isabella felt her soul growing heavier, yet lighter at the same time. She could feel the rise of dawn, the sun creeping closer, threatening to burn her away forever. But as the dance continued, the music seemed to slow, as if time itself was stretching to allow them one final moment together. Alexander's face, once youthful and full of life, now seemed worn by time, yet still filled with that same tenderness that had always been there. And in his eyes, she saw what she had longed for, an acceptance, a love that transcended the years and the pain. As they slowed, the music softly trailing into silence, Isabella held him tighter, not wanting to let go. This dance had been their last moment of grace, their final chance to share what they had once had. And though the sun was about to rise, though her time was coming to an end, she felt no fear. For in this dance, she had found peace. The sun approaches. As the haunting melody of the waltz swirled around them, Isabella felt the world narrowing to a singular point, the approach of dawn. The sky outside, once a blanket of darkness, was now tinged with the faintest glow of first light. Her senses, finally attuned to the rhythm of time, could feel the weight of the inevitable approaching like a tidal wave that could not be avoided. The dance, which had started so gracefully, had slowed with the passing moments, now moving in a languid, almost desperate manner, as if their bodies, too, could sense the finality of the night. Each step they took seemed heavier than the last. The once smooth movements between them became more frail, more strained, as Isabella's heart, cold and unfeeling for centuries, began to beat faster in her chest, an echo of a time long past. She fought against the tears that threatened to escape her eyes, the dam she had built around her emotions finally starting to crack. The thought of saying goodbye to Alexander, to all that they had shared, broke something inside her. Her chest tightened with the weight of unspoken words, of lost time. But she couldn't let him see. She couldn't let him know how deeply the impending loss was affecting her. She had been strong for so long, a creature of the night who had learned to suppress her emotions, to bury her humanity beneath the cold shell of her vampire nature. But now, as the sun began its slow rise in the east, she could feel the world slipping away. She wanted to scream, to tell him everything, but the words were caught in her throat, like a curse that refused to be spoken. Alexander, still holding her close, seemed unaware of the full weight of what was happening. He felt the tension between them, the sudden heaviness in the air, but he could not grasp the truth of it. To him, this was simply a moment, a final dance, yes, but one filled with emotion, a farewell to a woman he had once loved. But Isabella knew better. She knew that with every passing second, the sun was coming closer, and with it, the end of their story. Rising tension. The minutes seemed to stretch into eternity. Each second that ticked by felt like a cruel reminder of their fleeting time together. The sky outside had begun to lighten, and Isabella could feel the warmth of the sun inching closer, like a predator waiting to pounce. The dance, once an act of love, had become an act of surrender. She was no longer dancing for the joy of the moment, but for the closure that was slipping through her fingers. She could no longer bear the weight of the unspoken truth. It pressed down on her, suffocating her, and she knew she had to tell him. She couldn't let him leave here, unaware of what was happening, unaware of what she was. The time for secrets was over, and the truth had to be spoken, no matter the cost. The dance slowed to a near halt, their bodies moving in an agonizingly slow circle, their feet barely skimming the floor. Isabella's heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow, but her voice steady as she finally broke the silence that had hung between them like a thick fog. Isabella's revelation. Alexander, she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of what she was about to say. She pulled back from him slightly, looking into his eyes that had once been full of love and hope, and now were filled with confusion and concern. She had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. The walls she had built around herself were crumbling, and she stood before him, an immortal creature who had lived far longer than any mortal should, about to reveal the truth that had haunted her for centuries. I can't hide it any longer, Isabella continued, her voice barely audible above the soft murmur of the music. She swallowed hard, her throat tight as she forced the words out. I am not who I was when we first met. I'm not human. I was changed, turned into something else, something unnatural. I'm a vampire, Alexander. She watched as the words landed on him, each one a blow to his heart, each one a crack in the reality he had so desperately held on to. For a moment, he didn't move, his expression frozen in disbelief. The dance had stopped completely now, their bodies no longer moving, only standing in the heavy silence between them. Isabella could feel his shock, his confusion, and she braced herself for the inevitable reaction. His gaze flickered away, as if the truth were too much to bear. His chest heaved in a shaky breath as he slowly let the words sink in. The love they had shared, the life he thought he knew, had all been built on a foundation that was no longer solid. What does that mean? Alexander asked, his voice low and strained, as though he were afraid that the ground beneath him would disappear if he spoke too loudly. His hands, which had once held her so confidently, were now trembling, unsure of what to do. Isabella closed her eyes, a tear slipping from the corner of her eye. It was the first tear she had allowed to fall in centuries, and it was both a release and a confession. It means, she whispered, that this is my last night. The sun will rise, and I will either be destroyed by its rays or finally be at peace. Alexander's heart lurched in his chest as the gravity of her words fully sank in. He looked at her, his face stricken with grief. It was as though the world had shifted beneath his feet, and he was no longer sure of what was real. His beloved Isabella, this woman he had once shared his life with, was not merely a beautiful, immortal creature. She was something else entirely, something that defied the very rules of life and death. Isabella. I don't know what to say, Alexander stammered, his voice breaking with the weight of the revelation. "I never knew. I never wanted you to," she whispered, stepping closer to him, her hands reaching for his. "But you deserve to know. I wanted you to know before it's too late." As the sky outside brightened further, the tension between them intensified, the truth now fully between them, as palpable as the air they breathed. The sun was moments away from rising, and everything they had shared, everything that could have been, was slipping away, just like the final moments of their dance. Isabella knew the time was near, and all she could do now was hold him for as long as she could, hoping that somehow, in this last act of love, she could find the peace she had so desperately sought for centuries. This section builds the tension as Isabella reveals her true nature, and the weight of her immortality, in the approaching dawn, becomes clearer to both her and Alexander. The revelation of her curse sets the stage for their inevitable farewell, making the stakes all the more tragic. Final moments. The first light of dawn crept slowly through the mansion's grand windows, casting a soft, golden glow across the room. The shadows that had ruled the night began to retreat, giving way to the early rays of morning. Isabella could feel it, could feel the weight of time shifting, the sun's arrival inching closer, its warmth both a promise and a threat. And yet, she stood still, unmoving in Alexander's arms, her heart heavy but strangely at peace. They had reached the end of their journey together. This final moment, this last dance, had been their goodbye, and now, as the light broke over them, the truth was clear. There was no more time, no more illusions. The world outside was waking, but in here, in this small, fleeting moment between night and day, they could still hold on to each other, just a little longer. Alexander held her close, his arms wrapped around her as though he, too, was unwilling to let go. He had not fully understood what she had been through, what she was, but he knew now. And in that understanding, there was no fear, just love, just the shared grief of two souls that had been torn apart by fate, now finding their final peace in each other's embrace. "Isabella," he murmured softly, his voice trembling as he pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't know how to say goodbye to you. I've never known how to live without you, and now, I have to learn to let you go." Isabella's eyes fluttered shut, and she placed a hand gently over his heart. "You don't have to say goodbye," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the rising sun. "You never really lost me, Alexander. Our love was never about time or what we could have had. It was real, and that's enough for me. I've lived for centuries, but it's only now, in your arms, that I feel truly alive." The peace she had been seeking for centuries settled in her chest, warming her cold, dead heart. The terror of her immortality, the endless years of loneliness and sorrow, had dissolved in these final moments. For the first time in so long, she felt whole. She was no longer a prisoner of time, no longer burdened by the curse that had defined her existence. She had loved deeply, and now she was ready to let go, ready to embrace the release that had eluded her for so long. The first tendrils of sunlight slipped through the curtains, casting a soft, golden haze across the room. Isabella could feel the warmth of the sun's rays on her skin, though they were still distant. They were coming closer. The moment she had dreaded for so long was finally here, but this time, she did not fight it. Instead, she let the warmth wash over her, allowing herself to be bathed in it, to feel its life-giving embrace, even as it marked the end. She closed her eyes, her breathing slow, and even as she took in the moment. The world was quiet, save for the sound of her own heartbeat, steady, calming, and Alexander's breath, warm against her skin. She could feel him holding on to her, but she knew what she had to do. She had lived as a vampire, immortal and alone, for far too long. Now, it was time to step into the light, to finally break free from the chains of her endless existence. "I'm not afraid anymore, Alexander," she said softly, her voice barely more than a breath. "For so long, I feared this moment, feared what it would mean. But now, I know. This is not the end. This is my release." Her hands moved to his chest, her fingers lingering there for a moment longer, as if imprinting the warmth of his heart into her memory. She smiled faintly, her lips trembling with the last of her strength. "I love you. I always have. And even though our time was brief, it was real. I will carry you with me, always," she whispered. Tears glistened in Alexander's eyes, but he did not speak. There was nothing left to say. They had said everything they needed to say in their final dance, in their final moments together. His arms tightened around her, but he knew. He knew that it was time to let her go. The sun, now fully on the horizon, bathed the room in a golden glow. The warmth seeped into Isabella's skin, and for the first time in centuries, she felt alive again. Her heart, once cold and broken, now felt whole. She had loved, truly loved, and now she could finally let go. Isabella slowly pulled away from him, the last of her strength fading. She stood there for a moment, facing him, their eyes locked, her face soft with acceptance, with peace. There was no regret. There was only love, and in this final moment, she embraced it fully. As the sun's light finally reached her, she closed her eyes, surrendering to its warmth. Her body began to glow, slowly at first, then more intensely as the light overtook her. The curse of immortality, the endless torment of never-ending life, faded away. She was finally free. Isabella's breath caught in her chest one last time, and then she let it go. Her body dissolved into light, the last remnants of her being consumed by the sun as she embraced death not as an ending, but as a release. The moment was fleeting, but it was everything. She was free. The room was silent now, save for the gentle sound of the wind outside. The light of dawn had fully taken over, filling every corner of the mansion with its warmth. Alexander stood there, his arms outstretched, still feeling the echo of her presence. But she was gone, and though his heart was broken, he knew she had found peace. Their love had been brief, but it had been real, and in that, he found solace. The woman he had loved was no longer bound by the curse of immortality. She had found freedom in the very thing that had once terrified her. As the sun rose higher, Alexander stood in the light, holding on to the memory of their final moments, of the love they had shared, and the peace she had finally found. This section brings Isabella's journey full circle, emphasizing the themes of acceptance and release, as she finally lets go of her curse and embraces the end of her immortal existence. The tragic beauty of her final moments with Alexander is portrayed as a peaceful, redemptive release, rather than a sorrowful end. Conclusion: the aftermath. The morning passed slowly, as if the very earth itself had come to a standstill in the wake of Isabella's departure. The mansion, once vibrant with life and love, now stood eerily still. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint whisper of the wind outside. Alexander remained in the same spot, his eyes fixed on the place where Isabella had vanished, where she had finally found the peace she had long sought. But though her body was no more, her presence lingered in the very walls of the mansion, in the very air he breathed. He slowly sank to his knees, his hands trembling as they pressed into the cool, empty floor. The memory of their final dance was burned into his mind, a bittersweet symphony of love and loss that echoed in his heart. He could still feel the delicate weight of her in his arms, the way she had looked at him one last time, her eyes filled with peace, with a love that transcended all the years they had spent apart. But now she was gone, and he was left with nothing but the haunting remnants of their time together. The mansion, which had once felt alive with the warmth of their shared love, now felt like a tomb, its walls holding only the sorrow of what had been lost. The echoes of their laughter, their whispered conversations, their shared dreams, all of it was gone. All that remained was the emptiness that followed in the wake of her passing. Yet, amid his grief, there was something else, a strange sense of peace. He had lost her, yes, but in her death, she had found what she had long been searching for, release from the curse of immortality. She was free, and in that knowledge, a quiet solace settled over him. Isabella had suffered for so long, and now, at last, she was at rest. Though Alexander's heart ached with the weight of her absence, he could not bring himself to regret their time together. Their love had been brief, fleeting in the grand sweep of time, but it had been real. And in that, it had been enough. It would always be enough. As the day wore on, Alexander stood slowly, his hands still shaking as he wiped the tears from his eyes. The mansion, now bathed in the soft light of late morning, seemed to shimmer with memories of what had been. It was as if the very air was filled with Isabella's spirit, her laughter, her touch, the softness of her presence in every room. The weight of grief was still there, but it was tempered by something else, something that Alexander couldn't quite name. It was as though the love they had shared had become a part of the very fabric of the mansion, woven into its walls, its floors, and its windows. He walked slowly through the rooms, his footsteps soft and echoing, as if afraid to disturb the peace that had settled over the place. He passed the grand ballroom where they had danced their final waltz. The floor, now empty, seemed to hold the memory of their last steps, the music still faintly reverberating in the corners of the room. The silence, though heavy, was not oppressive. It was quiet, peaceful, as if the world itself had paused to honor the love that had once filled these walls. In the garden, where Isabella had once laughed in the moonlight, Alexander found a bench beneath a willow tree. He sat there, staring out at the landscape beyond, his mind lost in reflection. The sun was high now, and the world was alive with the vibrancy of day. But in his heart, the night lingered, the night of their final dance, the night when love had transcended time, when it had surpassed death itself. He realized, then, that love was not bound by the limitations of time or mortality. Though Isabella had passed beyond the reach of this world, her love remained. It had carved its mark on him, on the mansion, on everything that had once been. Even in death, love endured. Isabella had been his first love, his only love, and though their time had been short, it was a love that would last forever. In his heart, she would always be with him. Her memory would live on, not just in the echoes of the mansion, but in the quiet corners of his soul. The sun, in all its brightness, could not extinguish the warmth that her love had left behind. As he sat there, lost in thought, the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it the faintest trace of a melody, a waltz, soft and distant, like a dream. And in that moment, Alexander closed his eyes, a gentle smile curving his lips. He had loved, and in loving, he had been changed. The mansion was silent, but the memory of their final dance lingered in the air, a testament to a love that had transcended time, that had defied the boundaries of life and death. And though Isabella was gone, her love, like the mansion itself, would remain forever. This conclusion reflects the deep grief and acceptance that Alexander experiences after Isabella's death, while highlighting the enduring nature of love, even beyond death. The mansion, once filled with life, now becomes a lasting monument to their love, a place where their memory will live on, a testament to a connection that transcends time and mortality.